Welcome to Out with Dan, the podcast that spotlights and examines the voices of LGBTQ+ authors, characters, and our allies. Together, we lift our voices and we tell our stories. I'm Dan White. Join me as I chat with this week's author. Welcome back to Out with Dan. Today I'm excited to talk to Michael Kraft about Desert Deadline. Welcome, Mike. Right? Yes, let's get a copy of this beautiful book.
Get those props up there. Yeah.
I love it. I love this cover.
Yeah.
It is so indicative of Palm Springs.
Oh, thank you. As you probably realize, the blood splotch in there, which kind of makes the cover, doesn't have much to do with the actual murder, but it sets the scene and it tells you that mischief is in the works.
And there is definitely mischief in this book. This is your second in your series, Dante&Jazz. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. The first one, Desert Getaway, was published just about a year ago right now. And Desert Deadline, Dante&Jazz #2, has just been released. And so I'm happy to be here to chat with you about it. Lots of people interested in it.
Yes, well, and it's a good read too. It's your two main characters, Dante O'Donnell and Jazz Friendly, they fit well together. They're very different, physically, they're very different people, but they fit together. How did you come up with this story or this coupling?
Well, I mean, that's sort of interesting, Dan. I think it was 4 years ago. I was approached out of the blue one morning in an email asking if I'd like to consider contributing a short story to an anthology that was being put together by Akashic Books. Okay. And it was to be titled Palm Springs Noir. Now, Akashic does a whole series of these city noir anthologies. Boston Noir, New York Noir, Chicago, LA, you name it. Right. And Barbara DeMarco Barrett, who's a writer and editor here in Southern California, was pitching to them the idea of doing something with Palm Springs. And, just right off the bat, I thought this is a great idea, because the idea is to do something in the noir genre, set here in sunny Palm Springs. And what a great contrast. The thing is, I had never really dabbled in anything that noirish. I've written a lot of mysteries, but not in the noir vein. And I was just at a point where I was wrapping up another series. It was 3 cat mysteries, the Mr. Puss mysteries. And I was thinking, and they were doing very well, and I had a ball writing them. But it's not. I didn't set out to become a cat mystery writer, and I didn't want to, exit at the end of my life known as a cat mystery writer. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That's a perfectly valid subgenre. Yes. But I was kind of scratching around to try something else. So I thought, write a noir short story, just kind of rewire your brain. And so I had to come up with a new setting, new characters, new backgrounds. I was creating this out of whole cloth, so to speak. Okay. And I started with the characters. I mean, and I don't usually do that. I'll usually start with the plot or with the murder. Okay. I knew that I wanted some contrast. So I came up with a gay white man and a black straight woman. And these two at a surface level, just don't mix at all. In fact, they get off on a very bad foot when in the short story, Jazz arrests Dante for a murder that it seems that he has committed. And he didn't do it.
Right.
And works his way out of it, and they come to gain a measure of respect for each other. And then finally, ultimately, they start working together. They both have a lot of baggage in their prior lives, and both are starting over. And so they're an accommodation is made for each other. Jazz is or was a Palm Springs police officer, but she got booted off the force, and so she started a private eye business, and she's scratching to find work, and she realizes that Dante, who is a concierge for a vacation rental outfit in Palm Springs, runs into a lot of, rich folks who are coming out to pamper themselves. And, by her estimation, these people have problems. She solicits leads from Dante to feed her clients. And this becomes the premise of the series. Oh, so what I should say is I wrote a story called VIP Check-In for the anthology Palm Springs Noir.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
And it was published, I forget, 2 years ago or so. And the story in it, did really well. I mean, I actually got a wonderful blurb from the Los Angeles Times while they were reviewing the book. But on my own, I determined, that story is the basis for, a book, certainly a book-length novel. If not an entire series. So I was off and running with it.
I love that. And a call or an email just sort of out of the blue, and that sets you on a new track. How wonderful is that?
Well, and I should also mention that Barbara, the editor, had queried Todd Goldberg, who's a noted novelist and educator here in the Coachella Valley. He heads a Master of Fine Arts program in creative writing at the University of California, Riverside, and it's a low residency program that's actually based out here in the desert. And I had become acquainted with him and had lectured once or twice during his MFA residencies, and so we knew each other. And she had asked him to recommend writers she might approach for this, and I was on the list, which was very flattering. And so I owe Todd a big thank you. And it turns out when I had a manuscript together for the first Dante&Jazz book, Desert Getaway, my agent was working on soliciting various publishers, and I was too. And it came to my attention that Todd's brother, Lee Goldberg, has a publishing house of his own, Brash Books, and he just jumped on it. He got it right away. So he served as editor of that first volume and publisher of the book. This second installment, Desert Deadline, has now moved to another publisher, Questover Press, and on we go. And
that is amazing. I mean, and it is the writing community, like most communities, it's large and yet it's small. Yes. Sometimes you run into some of the same people, especially if you're writing in a particular genre, you run into some of these people. But it's so wonderful. And I find that the writing community as a whole is typically really welcoming. And they're also, when Barbara asked Todd, who he recommended, I'm sure he had a list handy and ready. And that's a wonderful thing. That is a wonderful thing. So do you find that, I know you live in the Palm Springs area. So do you enjoy setting your stories there? And I ask that because people who've been there, we know what Palm Springs is like, but maybe someone doesn't know what Palm Springs is like. So give us a little flavor of the city and tell me whether you like writing for Palm Springs area.
Oh, yeah. I Palm Springs, or the whole Coachella Valley. I actually live in Rancho Mirage, which is just, 10 minutes from Palm Springs. The geographical setting and just the quality of life in the desert, and just the sheer visual impact of being here is so stunning. I mean, I first visited here probably 30 years ago as a Midwesterner from the Chicago area, and it was the first time I'd ever been in California. And to get off that plane at the Palm Springs airport, I mean, back then they didn't have the jetways and all that. You'd actually, walk down this ladder onto the tarmac, and there you are, seemingly in the middle of nowhere with mountains everywhere you look, all the way around you. It's truly a valley, and it's a desert valley. So there's mountains with snow on them, but on the ground, everything is green and, growing and lush. And I mean, it is a remarkable setting. And I mean, I've talked with my husband Leon about this many times. I mean, that first trip there, I became instantly aware that this is where I want to end up someday when I'm not working a job and I don't have other commitments. This is where I want to be. And I've been, just so fortunate now to call this place home for about 18 years full time. So I've been through that many summers here. I'll trade for a Midwestern winter any day.
Any day. It is one of those things. It is such a visual place. I was out a few weeks ago, maybe about 6 weeks ago, and it was easily 100 degrees in Palm Springs, and there was still snow on the mountains by the tramway. There wasn't a lot, but it gives an author, at least in my opinion, such a visual, and a unique thing about the Palm Springs noir is noir most people think of as dark and gritty, which it often is. Palm Springs is almost the exact opposite, because it seems like the sun never sets. It does, but it is so bright that you have a hard time to hide, which
Well, and that's the beauty of the contrast of writing murder mysteries set here in paradise. I'm not the first one to come up with that notion. I mean, there's death in paradise. There's lots of things in paradise, but trouble in paradise. It's just such a compelling contrast, because the setting is so visual. I mean, it works on all of the senses. I mean, but I've always enjoyed including a good deal of description in my writing, and I'm told I do this very well. I enjoy it. There's a certain poetry to the place, and I love having that as an aspect, of the setting that I treat more as a character in the book rather than just a backdrop. And the
descriptions are so eloquent, and when we read, we get a feeling of what Palm Springs actually feels like, as far as not only heat, but just in sort of a taste of it as well, a feeling and a taste, and you become enmeshed in it. Well, and the number of people that come to Palm Springs, either from the Midwest or from here in Los Angeles, there should always be an enormous parade of characters for you to get a mystery around.
Oh, yes. I mean, I think Dante jokes at some point in either of the books that, working as a concierge, a VIP concierge for a vacation rental company, he comes into contact with many guests who have a lot of baggage. And he means it. There's another aspect of Palm Springs, an obvious aspect of Palm Springs that we didn't mention and ought to be obvious, but people who don't live here may not know it. And that is there's such a gay element to the whole setting. Palm Springs proper is, by various estimates, between 40 and 60% gay. The rest of the Coachella Valley is not quite that densely populated with gay people, but we're a thing everywhere here. And I'm gay, of course, and I've written gay fiction for 30 years now, and so I mean, it's just a natural place to write the stories that I'm writing right now.
And it's a very welcoming place. I mean, I think that one of the things I've told people over the years is going out from Los Angeles out to Palm Springs. People go to Palm Springs for the happy. And so they bring a good personality with them for that. Yes, they bring their baggage because we bring our lives. Mm-hmm. Then there are people who live there who enjoy that. And I'm sure there are people there that think, oh, I really wish all you weekenders would go away. But that gives the city
Yeah.
many different levels.
Right. Those of us who are here year round really do kind of look forward to the summer when, the traffic dies down and you can walk into any restaurant without a reservation if it's open. And, so there's a nice, much slower pace in the
Yes.
hot months. But, even the friendliness that you mentioned is absolutely an aspect of living here. When my husband and I first put down roots here, it was, I think, in 1998. We bought a small condo as just like a foothold in the desert. We whenever we could get scrounged together, vacation time together, we'd come out. And and actually living here is far different from staying in a hotel or whatever. And so, like, I noticed even that first morning of waking up, in your own bed, in your own little home in the desert. And then you go out to take a walk and everyone's so friendly. I mean, the gardeners, everyone says good morning. And because everyone's seemingly so happy. So again, what a great place to plot a murder.
I love that too. Well, and you've done such a wonderful job about this. I mean, Dante&Jazz are thrown into a situation again where there's a murder committed and then there's a kidnapping that's committed later on, and we have them. They're not slow. I mean, they're totally busy in Desert Deadline. I mean, there's no downtime for the two of them, and that makes great pacing for the reader as well. One thing, absolutely. One thing I'd like to highlight is Dante is not 22 and he's not 92. He's aging, but you've written an aging gay man who is still attractive to people. Right. And that was something I really, really liked, because it's in reading books. I mean, an author can go any way they want to go, but finding a character who is not 22, again, who's somebody who's aging, who is still perceived to be attractive, sexy, and people want to know Dante. I commend you highly for that, because that's something that was really, really lovely to read.
Thank you. And it's important. Well, we're all getting older. So
thank goodness.
I know that's the kind of story I would like to read.
Yes.
And I know there are many other gay men of my generation who like to read. And and I think it's safe to say that that a much younger generation is not into reading novels the way we were brought up to do. So
yeah, I think it is different. I have friends my age that I say, hey, would you like to read this? No, I don't read. And I'm like, okay, good to know you're X'd off the list. You won't get a book for a Christmas gift. So, it's okay. But, it is true. But it's also, I think, in this day and age, for me, one of the things I'm very present about is representation. Yeah. And it's easy to make fun of something. But yet again, you've created a character he's well thought out. He's fully formed. He's sexy and vibrant. And he has his own baggage. Dante gets a lot of intersections that he has to figure out which way to go. And I like his choices, but I was also rooting for some of the things that weren't the choices he made, because he had options. And I thought that was so wonderful.
Thank you.
How did you feel about Jazz? I mean, I love Jazz, but is Jazz someone that you really enjoy writing? And I asked that very seriously. So
yes, very much. But I approached the notion of writing the Jazz character with considerable trepidation. I mean, most obviously, I'm not Black, and she's the second most important character in the book. She's not the narrator. Dante is the narrator. So everything is told as Dante perceives it. So I never really get into Jazz's head. We never know what she's thinking unless she says it. So, originally, when I was putting together the bits and pieces and bones of that original short story and coming up with the cast for it at its inception, the Jazz character, she wasn't even named Jazz at that point. She didn't have a name, but I assumed it was a white woman. Mm-hmm. And I kept toying with the idea, well, let's make her a black woman. That makes her all the more different from Dante at the outset, and there's so much talk of appropriation and all that. I mean, I didn't, how could I presume to write that character? But then as a writer, I needed to step back and fully understand that I can't just write about people like me. And in fact, no novelist worth his or her worth, would do that. I mean, for instance, male novelists write female characters all the time and vice versa. And so, I mean, it's certainly possible to populate the cast of a novel with characters that are very, very different from yourself. And that's what I tried to do with Jazz. Before the first novel was published, I sent it to, coldly, I approached a number of Black authors, Black female authors, to see if they would read it and just, give me, let me know if there were any danger signs that I needed to be more attentive to. And I got no negative feedback. And all I can say is that now, it's been well over a year since the first novel appeared. And I have not been called on that even once. Not to pat myself on the back and say how well I've done it. But I mean, I tried to do it with a sensitivity, and my heart was in the right place. But
it totally comes through, Mike. I mean, that's the big thing about it. I mean, I agree with you that when an author writes characters, they have to write some that are like themselves. But to stretch, an author always has to write characters that are not like themselves. Right. And as long as you or anyone, whether it's an author or a reader, approaches a character that you give them a chance and you give them, you give them an honest voice. You could make a caricature tour of any character in one of your books, but then it becomes a humor book and not something to be taken as seriously. So I applaud you. I think you did a wonderful job.
Thank you.
And I enjoy, as I said earlier, there's a lot about them that is so different, but there's a lot about them that's so similar because they have similar goals, and that's a human aspect.
That was the point. Yes,
absolutely.
And but both Dante and Jazz are at some level very flawed characters, and but they're both struggling to make themselves right, and they recognize that in each other, and that becomes the basis for their bond. I think it works.
I think it works wonderfully. I think you've done a wonderful job. Again, the book is called Desert Deadline, and it's by Michael Kraft. Mike, do you have a website or social media you would like to share?
Of course I do. The website's very simple. It's michaelkraft.com, Kraft with a C. The website's about 25 years old. And so when I was, first putting that together, and you have to, what do you call it? I thought, well, ideally it would be michaelkraft.com. And I mean, it wasn't taken. I mean, I sort of feel for writers today who are putting together their first author's website, and it would be something like michaelkraftthenovelist.com or something like that. So yeah, it's easy. You get there, go to michaelkraft.com. From there, you can find my Facebook link, which is I don't recall it on. It's Michael Kraft, but then it has a number after it. But you can either just search on Facebook and find me, or go to my website, go to the contact page on my website, and there's a direct link to my Facebook page.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for joining me, Mike. I appreciate it very much.
It was an absolute pleasure, Dan. Thanks for having me with you.
Thank you. Hang on for me just a second. Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Out with Dan. You can find more information about this podcast and its host at OutWithDan.com, on Twitter at OutWithDan, and on Instagram and Facebook at GoOutWithDan. This podcast is hosted by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, and the theme music is provided by bensound.com. Join us again soon for the next episode of Out with Dan.